where we are planning, making budgets, making strategies, etc. When you guys were planning for 2020, did you anticipate anything like this? And if no, I mean, what has this taught business executives about planning in future?
Banji, as with most organizations, we didn't envisage this happening. However, we have a fairly strong risk management function in ARM. So we already had business continuity plans in place for the disaster management. And this was quite useful and served as the backbone for our crisis management and response to the effects of the pandemic. So with regard to business planning in the future, as part of the business continuity plan, organizations must learn to, if you have a business continuity plan, you must learn to run simulations periodically to ensure that your plan remains implementable. Also, from this crisis, it's clear that businesses need to be nimble, develop a business model that enables you to respond to market shocks very quickly. Therefore, businesses need to think about how work will be organized going forward. Businesses need to be more data-driven in their decision-making and build the right capabilities needed to serve clients.
Thank you, Jumoke. Just let's move in a different direction, maybe something more specific to your business. For the benefit of people who are on the line, maybe if you can.
Hello, Banji, can you hear me?
Yes, Chino, we can hear you. You're welcome back. So part of what we're trying to get used to now is technological challenges. So Chino, we understand, it's okay. I was just asking a question around specifics of your businesses, right? So Jumoke, you guys are in investment management, maybe a little bit about what you guys do. What parts of your business have you seen major disruptions, and specifically how are you guys coping with these disruptions right now?
Okay, as you know, ARM is an asset management company. So we manage investments across the global market, equities and fixed income for retail clients, high net worth investors and institutional investors. We also have investments in alternative market, private equity, investments in infrastructure, agriculture, and just general PE. We're also in real estate, so we cut across various sectors, really. To your question, the investment side of our business was the most impacted. In the first few weeks after the lockdown, we experienced panic selling as clients sought to hold their investments in cash out of fear that they may not have access to their investments because of the lockdown. Also, there was concern over how the markets would react, especially the equity markets. Investors just wanted to exit because they expected that the market would take a dive. So we had to reach out to clients, and we held a webinar to share our views on the economy and the impact of the pandemic and what investors should be doing. In times like this, it is very important to communicate. And these have helped to calm nerves. So we made the switch to remote working, for all our employees just before the lockdown was officially mandated by the federal and state governments. So, and since then we've been meeting with them and just taking them through this journey as we discover it ourselves.
Thank you. Chino, I don't know if Chino is on the line. Chino?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Oh, yes, I can hear you, Chino. So, Chino, I mean, with respect to infra credit, maybe just a few words on what you guys do, and generally speaking, what kind of disruptions have you witnessed to your business and how you're coping?
Thank you. Okay, so sorry, the internet, I got cut off. But what I was trying to talk about at the initial time was to highlight the fact that we track recovery based on when the treatment or the vaccine ultimately will be determined, because there's a strong view that until people psychologically feel that their risk of contracting the virus has fallen, many economists say that there won't be any rapid economic rebound. So we would see some kind of slowed recovery. So we've taken sort of like a 12 to 18 month view on how this will evolve and impact on the economy and markets in general. For us, what have we experienced? And I think like every other employer, we've had to obviously start working remotely. We've had to review our growth plans. Clearly, adverse impact on economy like this is impacting consumer demand, ability to pay, and that ultimately trickles into impacting on a lot of the demand assumptions driving most business opportunities this year. And so from a credit standpoint, there's a second look at our portfolio and the opportunities, both existing portfolios and new business opportunities. So what impact does this have? One is, from a business standpoint, we've had to look inwards to understand better, where we should be focusing on, because there are certain areas you have little control over, and there are areas you can focus on being able to build efficiencies. So firstly is being able to re-strategize, and I think one thing we've been able to do very quickly is to adapt. First is health and safety, ensuring that we put in measures in place to secure health and safety of employees. This involves increased expenses even on the security side of your expense line. Business continuity has been something we've had to begin into and look at our IT infrastructure intently and sort of further strengthen it, because we prepared for it, but we didn't prepare as long as one would have anticipated. But we had already the necessary baseline infrastructure, but it's now to enhance that and ensure that we actually imagine that human behavior and business behavior would come out of this pandemic evolving and probably not going back, because what we found is a bit more improved productivity because of you found that the traditional way of working is you expect people to come into the office every day, but over time you found that traffic, when you calculate in a week the travel time and what that impacts on your productivity, you're now as an employer asking yourself, do I really need everybody in the office every day? And this is going to impact on how we view productivity, and beyond just even this pandemic. I think over time you're going to be asking yourself, do I really need to host all my employees in a costly city? For example, as you scale everybody working out of Lagos. I mean, these are broader questions that I imagine for most businesses, they begin to ask themselves, because we've been working quite effectively as a team over the past 3 months without having to physically see each other. And some employees are not even in the country, but we worked very well together. So that is really throwing up a lot more questions in terms of the way we've been working and how we should look at work for the future. I think I did talk about the fact that from a credit risk perspective.
Sorry,
you're on mute. Okay.
Hold that thought for a second, because I'm going to come back to that whole work from home, efficiency and all that, because that's an important point for business leaders right now. But before we do that, I want us to run a poll. Let's get a sense of how people are feeling. Let's get some response from the audience. I see we have, at least for my record, about 150 people online right now. So can we run the first poll? Can that be running? So we have a few questions for you. I'm sure the speakers are interested in finding out some of the responses to these questions. So the poll is open. Just vote to these 2 questions. Okay. We're about 40%. We'd like to see more votes. Okay. Okay. 90 people have voted, just a few more. I'm going to close the poll in 15 seconds. So if you haven't voted, please do that now. Okay, I don't know if the speakers can see. You can see what people are saying. Can you say it, or do I need to?
No.
Okay, you cannot say it, just a second. Okay, so I'll end the polling in 10 seconds. Okay, so the first question, can you see the results right now on your screens?
No.
Yes, I can. I think I can see it now.
Okay.
Okay. I still
All right.
can't.
Let me just read it. In view of the disruption caused by COVID, which of the following best describes how you're feeling right now? So, of the people listening, about 32% are worried about the future. They believe the worst is yet to come. 13% indifferent. But interestingly, we have 55% of people who are optimistic that the worst is already behind us. Any comment on that, Jumoke? People are more optimistic.
Well, it's good to be optimistic. Is the worst behind us? Honestly, I really can't say. I don't think it is. We're beginning to hear of a possibility of a second wave in other countries because there's been argument that perhaps maybe economies open too soon. So if we have a second wave, that's likely to, and it leads to a lockdown. I think that's going to be devastating for economies. Even now, the full effects of the lockdown is yet to be felt. We're likely to see that effect come into the different sectors as the months coming. Perhaps maybe in the second and the third quarter, we'll begin to see the full effects of that. So I don't think, in terms of perhaps maybe if we don't see a second wave, maybe in terms of the rate of casualties, perhaps that will drop. It will flatten out. But I think that the real effects on the economy will begin to come through from the third to the fourth quarter, and perhaps maybe until early next year. So I don't think the worst is behind us economically.
Okay. I mean, thank you, Jumoke, for that. Chino, I'm going to take you on the second one and link it back to your earlier thoughts on work. So the second question, in terms of responses, my organization has adapted well, more resilient to the pandemic, the shocks of the pandemic. Interestingly, 12% strongly disagree, but we seem to have a majority of 42% saying they agree. So I guess that kind of tallies with your earlier thoughts about how your organization has adapted and with respect to work from home and the efficiency you're seeing. So do you think this has come to stay, Chinua, or is just a passing phase?
Well, for some businesses, it's really going to impact on their organizational culture and how they evolve past this pandemic. And that's really around how versatile, how adaptable our business is to change, positive change. So to the extent that that it improves your productivity, your efficiency, I do believe it's really the future of work. And it will not just even work. It's even it would affect residential real estate and even lifestyles going forward, and where you want to live over time. And this will depend on how businesses begin to adapt. So a few businesses would adapt. We certainly will be looking better at how we want to be efficient and more productive. And so some of these best practices and more efficient approaches will be taken into consideration. So there is an evolving, and like, you know, that in every struggle, there's an opportunity to create a new market. I do think that, you know, through this struggle, there is an opportunity to create new markets, and that would mean new products, new services that would evolve out of this pandemic.
Yeah. Jumoke, has life changed in ARM as you used to know it? And is that
certainly.
changed?
Oh, certainly it has. You know, I was saying earlier that we started that lockdown much earlier. We made the switch to remote working. We made the switch to remote working much earlier than when it was announced by federal and state governments. Because we were concerned for the health and safety of our people. You know, the first couple of weeks was rough because people were trying to settle down into a new work pattern, but we soon adjusted. And now that we've reopened our offices, 90% of our workforce is still working from home, despite the ease of the lockdown. So for those who have gone back to work, we have strict health and safety protocols that must be followed. But, you know, as Chinua said earlier, I'm particularly impressed by the level of productivity during the period. We're still working remotely, and the level of productivity has increased. You know, and staff are enjoying some form of work-life balance. So I don't think that when things get back to normal, whenever that is, that we will go back to the way things were. I suspect that as an organization, we will adopt a structure where people are allowed to work remotely. It's worked quite well for us, but it also means a lot of things will change. How we interact with our clients will change. With our cost will come down, certain costs will come down, but some costs will go up. We've invested quite a bit in technology in the last few years, and that has helped us greatly in making this transition. But a lot still needs to be done if we intend to continue to work remotely, and especially if our clients prefer to engage online. You know, we need to make more investments in technology to ensure that we can actually continue, we can have the same platform, an online platform that is as efficient as what we had before, if not better. So we've prioritized, right now we've prioritized digital customer journeys, and we're optimizing the experience to ensure high quality standards and customer satisfaction. So we're committing a lot of time and resources, you know, to technology and encouraging our customers to use self-service channels. And I think that this is going to be the new normal for us.
Thank you. Chinua, if I can go one level down, you know, I know InfraCredit does guarantees, bond issuances and all that. And I'm also aware that you've done a few of those transactions already. You know, what are you hearing from your operating companies? I mean, the underlying companies that you've guaranteed bond issuance. You know, I understand how InfraCredit itself is coping from everything you say, and it's all nice and good. But your operating companies, how are they coping? I believe you must be closer to them right now. Okay, it doesn't seem like I have Chinua on the line again.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Because I think the internet is a bit slow here.
Go ahead, Chinua.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay.
So firstly, so you know, so we focus on infrastructure, and infrastructure typically are asset classes that have, you know, long-term predictable cash flow. They provide essential services, and so as a result, these type of companies usually have some resilience to recessionary environment because of the fact that they're providing essential services. There's some form of elastic demand for that service, and the long-term and stable. And so in downturns like this, they do have built in some level of resilience to withstand the shock. So if you look at our pipeline of projects we've supported over the past 2.5 years, they're mainly in the energy sector. But and power is obviously of essentiality for most users. You want to ensure before you cover a few other things. We all know that without energy, but despite the constraint on the lockdown, most of the users have prioritized the need for power. Maybe they may have reduced their intake. So you may have a slowdown. The same thing across other sectors as well that we support. So if you look at transportation, transportation may slow, but it's still essential for economic activity that you continue to provide transport. So in our pipeline of projects we're evaluating, we have transport and logistics, and also telecoms, which focuses around the managed tower services. And as we all know, data consumption has significantly gone up over this time, and will continue to be of high demand for the future. So I think the positive selection that comes with the type of risk, our risk acceptance criteria and the class of infrastructure assets we tend to focus on builds a sort of resilience into losses or recoveries, and so for us right now we're getting feedback that there is a stress, but irrespective of the stress, sustainability in the model, because the long-term demand for that service is still necessary for essential livelihood or for essential business activity. So that is how and so what we've done is we've conducted stress, how long the economic downturn continues, and when would this continue to have significant material adverse effect. Our view is, again, like I said, we'll take a 12 to 18-month view on the economy. Buffers have been built in to cover that level of stress within the economic environment. And I think in a depression, like everybody, like they say, in a depressional environment, we're all underwater, whether you are, whichever side of the economy you sit. But we do hope that with the policy response from the government, we will begin to see some recovery take place as we go through this economic cycle. But yeah, I think which is why at this point in time, even the need of having selecting carefully the type of credit risk you take on as an investor is very important. I think the market will begin hopefully to recognize the essence of having a guarantor or a guaranteed instrument, especially IFRS 9, and the way in which impairments are recognized under particular. I think by the end of this year, how a lot of fixed income investors, particularly non-sovereign fixed income investors, would have to recognize for impairment charges across their portfolio, taking into consideration some of the adverse impact of this economic downturn on most of these businesses. So for the benefit of having a guarantee and a guarantor and a AAA essentially necessary, and I think will be more valued times like this, and knowing that you have a risk sharing, a role in monitoring and evaluating the underlying credits, and when necessary, if there's a remediation that needs to happen, they play the role of ensuring that remediation. I think this value should be more appreciated by long-term investors that hold this sort of credit, this asset on their books.
Okay. I mean, Chino, I think that's a very valid point. It provides a lot of buffer and comfort to investors. But you raised a particular point around, potentially people, IFRS 9, and the potential impact that may have on people, and financial reporting generally. So, I mean, at the CFA Institute and CFA Society, obviously, the issue of ethics, financial reporting, investor protection, those are key things that we advocate and push for. So, I mean, a number of reports have been written recently that In a crisis, you tend to find a situation whereby management tends to become more unethical with respect to financial reporting, and all sorts of things. I'll just move to Jumoke on this question. What do you think we should expect? In the months ahead, we'll be seeing financial reports. Are we supposed to believe those reports, or should we assume that people have become more unethical, or you think people will become even more ethical? What's your view on this?
All decisions have an ethical or moral dimension for a simple reason, that they have an effect on others. So whatever you do, you have to bear that in mind. So at all times, not only even in periods like this when there's a crisis or management is under pressure, I think at all times it's imperative that managers and leaders do not compromise their standards. Your values are truly tested in terms of identity. And if you fail to uphold those standards, completely, you will lose your clients. So adhering to codes of conduct or to best practice or to sound accounting practices, will help to reassure investors and other stakeholders. So importantly, your employees would also feel more comfortable. They will prefer to work for organizations that are committed to values and ethics. And your clients would prefer to deal with organizations with strong records of adherence to standards of conduct. So really, there's nothing to be gained from lowering your standards. As Chinua said, everybody's underwater now. So if your business suffers in this period, I think it's a cycle, and you shouldn't, under any circumstance, compromise your ethics or your standards. That's very important, because that is a true test of a good organization.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think that's a very powerful message for people that are listening. I'm going to come back to both of you on your crystal ball on the economy, particularly Nigeria. But before we do that, I just want you to think, about your own view of the economy and, the kind of recovery we're expecting, if at all there's any. But before you do that, I want to see what people think about this same question, and let's see if the views of people will be any different from yours. So there's a second poll. At this point, I would like that poll to, let's get a feedback from people listening. The second poll can come on. Okay. So 2 questions for our participants. Please go ahead. 1 minute. Let's run vote on this poll. There are 2 questions. Please vote. Okay. I'm seeing some very interesting results here. Polling ends in 15 seconds. If you haven't voted, please do so now. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll right now, and then let's display the results. Okay. Chinua, Jumoke, can you see the results?
I still can't see the results.
You can. Okay.
I can't. I can't.
Well, I can.
Okay, you can? Okay, I can't.
Yes, I can.
I'm missing that.
Okay, Jumoke, your earlier comment on ethics and management decision making. our audience believes that management will be, 35% believe that management
Yes, now I can.
will be political. 36% believe that nothing will change. And only 29% believe that management will become more ethical. That's an interesting one. So technically speaking, about 70 something percent believe that either nothing will change or people will become more unethical around now. With respect to the economy, the first question, the general consensus, about 78% believe that Nigeria is headed for a prolonged recession before a sluggish rebound. So I'll just move this to Chinua. Chinua, do you agree or disagree
Mm.
with this?
So I think there will be certainly a recession. How long that will take really depends on a combination of factors. The global economic recovery also impacts on how our recovery rate would be impacted, but also the policy choices and the responses of the government is also obviously going to be very significant. So it will certainly be sustained, but for how long? And I think from what we get, the reports we get, the Economic Sustainability Committee reports, estimate that, a severe downturn would happen in our oil earnings, as a result of which, even at oil price at $30 a barrel, we'll still have a shortfall of about 185 billion naira every month in an amount, available for the three tiers of government. That unemployment rate may rise up to 33.6%. About 39.4 million people, by the end of 2020 may lose. Preemptive responses are not taken. So we have this risk of GDP even falling to minus 4 between 4 to 8%. Depends on how long this depends on what government is doing to respond to this pandemic. And there's a lot of activity going on. And that a lot of that depends on the indicator, how this would evolve over time. So we've taken a view as an institution. We've taken as at March, we took a 12-month view that there would be slowdown for 12 months. It doesn't mean that there won't be activity. So you see, there are positive impact sectors, right, that still grow. Like we did talk about, food, food sector. You also look at transportation, telecoms, even energy. So there's certain sectors that would still, and healthcare would have a positive impact during this downturn. But in general, there will be a slowdown. However, that said, I think that when we begin to look at the fact that circumstances throw up, innovative ideas on how to capture new markets that come up during this period. So this is it's evolved through, and we do see those market gaps that exist. And one example you would imagine is that now government is, unlike before, they're much more determined to implement PPPs as a source of income, and that will bring some level of positive impact to the extent that it is done appropriately and done in the right way, and you can now attract private sector capital to play a very critical role in national development. Could really for the future. And so if we take advantage of that circumstance that we see today, which is the fact that government is constrained, and as part of one of their primary strategies is to organize themselves in and attract private capital through public-private partnerships, then this is a significant opportunity during this crisis in infrastructure development through these public-private partnerships. So again, these are some positives that we see alongside the constraint that would happen. For most businesses, I imagine is really about liquidity and stability over the short to medium term, and what strategies you're putting in place to maintain that level of stability.
Thank you, Chino. I'm just going to we have quite a number of questions that have come on through the chat group. I'll just take a couple of them. Jumoke, someone says, is this really work-life balance? It's difficult to get off work most times. You're getting calls as late as 9 and 10 p.m., all in the name of working from home. we're now living at work rather than working from home. Any comments on that? Do you have any comments on that, Jumoke?
Sorry, I didn't hear that question. My internet went off briefly. Can you repeat the question, please?
So the question is, the person says, is this really work-life balance? I mean, people get calls as late as 9, 10 p.m. that in reality, we're actually living at work, not working from home. So any comments? I mean, as a CEO,
I can, you know, I think that that person is right. Some people have complained. In fact, you know, yes, I think it's a bit of both. People have complained that really you don't have working hours anymore. You know, everything just flows into it. But generally, the fact that you're at home and you're with family also helps to manage the situation, because you spend more time with your loved ones. You're watching your children. For people who have young children, it's a time to bond, and they've discovered a lot of things that they didn't know, you know, before. And they're spending more time with their children. So from that standpoint, there are, you know, advantages to this remote working. But yes, I empathize. I understand what you mean by there's really no working hours. Everything flows. You know, it's just a continuous process of hard work. I can see. I can understand that. But I think that if look at ARM, for example, we've opened our offices and only 10% are back at work. The rest of us are still working remotely, and people prefer to continue to work remotely. Yes, it's a lot more work. The working hours, you know, have become fluid, but the fact that they still get to spend a lot of time with their family, especially now, and you know, helps a great deal. So yes, I think there's a bit of work-life balance, but yes, I understand that question. I understand the point that there are no restrictions around work anymore. But if that is the price you pay for being close to family, I think at least if ARM is the statistic we have in ARM is anything to go by, people still prefer that.
Interesting. I mean, I think someone also mentioned something on the chat that because employers would like to balance their books, etc., and still come out with some profit, or you know, come out ahead, that employees may bear the brunt of both. The person is advocating that employees may need to be protected, some kind of employee rights being protected. Is this something you would support as CEOs of organizations? Chinua, do you have any view on this? Or Jumoke, if you heard me, maybe.
Okay, you know, the experience I have is very different, because I think now there's willingness. People are doing things choice, and there's no compulsion to get things. People are happy to work, and I don't know if this lasts for another year, another 3 months. But so far, what I've seen is because people have control over their time, they prefer the structure. Yesterday, if we think as we go along, think that this has been abused, have ways to protect. So far, what I think is willingness, and you know.
Okay, I think I lost Jumoke there, but if I heard you right, I mean, the point is...
Banji, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. But if I heard Jumoke right, she's of the opinion that once this starts to get abused, maybe over a prolonged period, then maybe, yes, moving in that direction may make some sense. Chino, do you agree with that?
Well, I think, I mean, this may not be for every institution, but what is important is, you know, again, something we're looking at is consistently evaluating the current state of assessing the cost of affairs, and this involves employee feedback, reviewing even performance management and get better productivity from them. So we're learning, and it's a very unique situation we find ourselves. Is unprecedented, and there was a knee-jerk reaction to some, while others just quickly adapted to the situation. So I think things will somehow even out for certain institutions that have, you have to have a value and a culture that should overcome any circumstances you find yourself, right? And ultimately, if you do have a cultural value that employees, welfare is paramount, and somehow that should prevail ultimately. But what's happened is there's more. You may find that some institutions are responsibility. Some employers are trying to retain employees and not have to, shut down shut down or reduce their cost of operations by having to let go of employees, but find better ways of engendering more productivity towards navigating through this challenge. So it is a very difficult situation for some, and I think it's as we evolve through this cycle, we learn, we adapt, and we get better at what we do. So I mean, there's no silver bullet really to addressing some of these issues, but certainly I think in the medium to long term, we all need to be clear about what values we hold. You want your employees to be engaged, you want them to be satisfied, you want them to be productive, and what is needed to achieve that balancing should happen as a natural evolution for businesses that have those values.
Okay, thank you, Chinua. There's a question on the economy and the fact that a lot of countries are going into debt, and you have all these fiscal stimulus, external borrowings, etc. And so, what do you think the impact of all these debt levels will be on economy? So that's one question from the chat group.
So I mean, like Jumoke highlighted, and I think it's all been well documented, this is very unprecedented time in our history. If we go back in time and look at the last economic cycle where we had this sort of stimulus packages and a lot of intervention by the government, what this does is a combination of things. I mean, it's all meant to boost the economy. Ideally, sometimes inject more liquidity into the system. And there are different ways it impacts ultimate recovery. Sometimes you have too much liquidity, looking for too few assets, over time, depending on the side of the financial markets you see it. In other instances, it could also create a moral hazard problem, depending on how those interventions are utilized. All in all, there's obviously a good intent in wanting to ensure that they can rebalance the economies and stabilize it for growth. We hope that, within most of these countries, we expect to see this help stimulate recovery to happen much quicker than it will take if you have to enable the natural forces of demand and supply to drive economic growth. So there's a well-intended strategy in injecting liquidity into the system. The unintended consequences are some of what we see we may see in the financial markets, where as the economy is rebounded, you have a lot more liquidity coming back into the system, and so it's also to prepare for that. That liquidity, and once it begins to the supply of assets at that point in time. But right now, it's about stability. It's about able recovery. And I think that's what's most paramount in everyone's mind at this point in time.
Okay. I mean, thank you. I think, that's a very valid point. We have very few minutes left, like 2 minutes. I'll just read one more question from the chat group. I think this also has to do with people. And we've talked a lot about people working from home. There are comments here around technology that because of the constraints on technology, working from home may be difficult on an ongoing basis, which is a fair point. I mean, Nigeria is struggling. On this platform, we've struggled, for example, with the internet and all that. So that comment has come up. There's also a comment here, which I find very interesting, that for many organizations, because of work from home, management tends to identify a few people who are high performers in quotes, and they are overwhelmed with work, and then some other people are just on holiday, essentially. So, is this something you're saying? Is that correct? And how do we navigate to ensure that the few people are not killed in the name of working from home? It's a good question.
Very good question, and I'm sure some of my people are actually happy or listening to this and saying, "Yeah, you're talking to me." It's. I think firstly, I think for employees is at least let me speak from a perspective is you have to love what you do, right? So there's a passion that comes with what you do. And when you're passionate about your work, there's a way you balance, what you do against your other priorities. It is certainly important to maintain a balance, and this is only going to be driven by employee feedback. I think that process of getting an honest feedback from employees is very important, especially now that things are remote, right? Even trying to conduct appraisals virtually. We're having to evolve from the traditional way of engagement, where you speak to people face to face and get feedback, to more remote ways of engagement. So this is something we need to pay particular attention to. As an employer, naturally you want to drive productivity, you want to sustain the business, you want to grow. So you may pay less attention to some of these things at the initial phase because you're focused on how do I maintain the ship, how do I sail through this, how do I maintain stability. So that is what is paramount in your mind. But inside of the business, obviously, some people are personally and otherwise maybe affected. I think HR have a very important role to play during this cycle. I think they have to be more responsive than before. So the traditional type of HR is naturally going to evolve to a bit more proactive and engaging HR. Speaking to employees, because beyond the mental stability as well that comes into all of this as well, people are going through different issues on both mental and otherwise. And I think the ability to engage with the employee through this process to be feedback to management so that they're able to plan appropriate plans is evolving, and there are all these events that are happening. And I think depending on each institutions and how they're structured to identify these risks or these events as they occur and find ways of mitigating it is very important.
Okay. I mean, thank you so much, Chinua, for that. I think that was very insightful. We've run out of time. Let me first apologize to everyone. I just could not take all the questions that we got on the chat group and all the questions that we got beforehand. But I see the chat group was very, very active. People were sharing ideas and thoughts. So I encourage people to quickly glance through and read some of those things that are there. I would like to thank Chinua for your time. We really appreciate having you on the CFA Society platform today. I would also like to thank Jumoke, even though I think we lost Jumoke towards the end. I think our internet connection went off. So we really appreciate Jumoke's time as well. So thanks to both of you for honoring us and for sharing all your thoughts and insights with the people. And to everyone that joined us today, thank you so much. The next webinar is a few weeks away. So follow CFA Society on all the channels and you can get more information about the topics and future speakers that will be coming on our webinars. So thank you so much. I wish everyone a safe time, a wonderful weekend, and let's continue staying safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.